We've now set ourselves up, ladies and gentlemen, to transition to topic 5, and that is on building the foundations, why ECD infrastructure matters. And this is a session that is being presented in partnership with the Development Bank of Southern Africa. We retain our pattern of leading with a sponsor introduction before we transition into a panel, which is preceded by a poll. And so it gives me a great pleasure now to introduce Chuene Ramphele, who is a group executive that looks after infrastructure delivery at the DBSA, to open up this session before we go into the panel. Can we please give Chuene a big round of applause? There you go.
Greetings to all of you. Let me also then appreciate the remarks and I don't know whether I must say the program director or what. As you know, in Parliament, there's a rise on a point of privilege. So from our side as the DBSA, let me introduce myself again. My name is Chuene Ramphele. I'm the Group Executive for Infrastructure Delivery. All what we know is the delivery of infrastructure, both from social and economic infrastructure. We're really very, very grateful that this association and the collaboration that we really are in with Trilogue and other related parties. We are saying from our side that this is the beginning, and for us, we would really want to see real, tangible, measurable results and the impact right there at the society, and that's why we're really going to see all of these things. But from our side as DBSA, infrastructure is crucial for development. And we start there to then say infrastructure is crucial for development. When we come here, we're riding on the roads that we call infrastructure. That's a sector that the DBSA is also looking at. When we look around, we then see there's issues of water, issues of ports, issues of housing, issues of education. That is basically the areas that we really take keen interest in, because we know that infrastructure actually is a catalyst to a real development. Our lens focus on ECD is that of investing in resilient infrastructure to enable sustainable development and inclusive quality early childhood development program. So when we were asked to really begin to deal with the issue of ECD, and some people will say, well, why is DBSA involved in ECD kind of programs? And we said, it is the foundation for us. And you ignore that particular part, what you're going to see down the line is that you're going to see a situation whereby you don't even have the right workforce. Because what you're breeding, you'll be breeding people that are misaligned to basically where the society needs to really be at. And that's why DBSA's development position is motivated by the goal of contributing to an increased access to services, education and health, etc. It is evidently clear that building of or improvement of infrastructure has a direct impact on the sustainable development goals. We also are really of a view that we must go beyond just for the success of for us to see the success of the sustainable development goals is when we see people having real tangible experience of water coming out of their taps, of education being of that quality. And that's basically for us what drives our motivation. We believe that ramping investment in the ECD is the right approach to design a productive generation that will be environmentally, socially, and economically relevant. And therefore, DBSA views ECD infrastructure as a critical infrastructure. It is critical because if it fails, it has a detrimental effect on human and ultimately economic development. We need to collectively and collaboratively put ECD infrastructure that promotes children's growth and well-being. We continue to value partnerships, and we have got partnerships with the organizations such as Early Child Foundation, Redline Africa. Let us use our smart partnerships to ensure construction of safe structures integrated with dignifying sanitation facilities, clean potable water, access to safe energy, proper food preparation facilities, and appropriate outdoor spaces. That's just beginning to indicate our commitment from the fact that when we look at ECD, we don't just look at it as just a structure there. We also look at the network infrastructure that needs to really be in a position to ensure that ECD is quite well functional. On that note, that's basically, to assert our DBSA's commitment towards ensuring that we use all our tools, whether it's CSR, whether it's infrastructure investments, financing, debt, all of this, to really drive this particular agenda. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, my good sir. Siyabonga. Yes, please. Thank you very much. Let's kindly please, Mr. Ramphele, a big round of applause. I think one of the lines that stays with me is that we're investing in infrastructure for a productive generation. I think that's really powerful when we begin to see the much bigger frame of what it means to actually lay a strong foundation that translates beyond as a legacy for the country, but also for the people of the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to invite my panelists to kindly please join me up on stage. I'm going to invite Ipleleng Mohlahla. Ipleleng got a woo. Oh, that's nice. Ipleleng is a bit of a fan club happening. Ipleleng is the CEO of the Early Care Foundation. She comes into this conversation with experience in leading large-scale ECD programs focused on governance, compliance, and institutional sustainability. And her work is grounded in community-driven, on-the-ground implementation that centers ECD practitioners. Let me also welcome Tracey Webster, who is the CEO of the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust. Guys, I need that woo for everyone now. Thank you. Tracey works across education, social justice, arts and culture, and she comes onto the stage with over 25 years of experience in social development, having also previously served as executive director of the African Leadership Institute and CEO of the Branson Center of Entrepreneurship. Welcome, Tracey. And then we're joined by Senzo. Senzo is the acting CEO of Ilifa Labantwana, and in his role, he looks after partnerships as well as impact, and he's engaged extensively with government departments on ECD policy programming. And then I noticed the error that I made with Mr. Ramphele Chuene. So now you get a woo, which you didn't get when you first came up. So let's woo you all the way back up. Well done. Thank you so much, and thank you for indulging me. As I take my seat, let me just kindly please remind us all again that your voice is so important in these conversations. It's one thing for me to ask the questions, but actually so much more powerful when all of us bring our collective insights and perspectives. So please, again, go to the green button at the bottom of the device, put in those questions, and then I'll try and integrate them into the conversation as best as I can. Let's kick off with our poll for this session that we'll then revisit once we've got a few questions underway. That should have, it's already popped up on our screens, and the question is, what do you think is the most underappreciated benefit of ECD facilities? What do you think is the most underappreciated benefit of ECD facilities? I'd like to see more than 42 people participate in this one, please. Is it the fact that it creates stable, meaningful employment in communities that we're not quite appreciating? Is it that it actually frees caregivers to participate in economic life? Is it that it anchors other services such as health, nutrition, and social support? Is it that it builds community ownership and pride in a shared public good? Or is it that it breaks the intergenerational cycle of poverty? And so we'll let that run in the background and just really encourage so many more of us just to put our fingers on the pulse of this one. And then we'll revisit it together with the panelists in a short while. So let me get back into the conversation. Chuene, where you left us is, which I really resonated with, is just a reminder that we could talk about the SDGs until we're blue in the face, but if we don't understand that in the absence of infrastructure, a tap will open and nothing will come out. in the absence of infrastructure, we'll talk about quality education, but our children will be sitting under trees and actually not having access to that education. But what we also know that all of that is core business for the DBSA. And so the question to you is, firstly, do you think it's overlooked by other companies who could step in as partners and funders in the work that you do? And do you think that there is a role that other companies should really be, who are not infrastructure players in the main, should be stepping into? And I'm going to add this as just an end thought for you to consider as you respond to that, is that there's always this perception that infrastructure is the primary business of government and public institutions. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on whether we are beginning to dispel that perception, because we actually need to crowd in a lot more funds in order to meet our infrastructure ambition.
No, thank you so much. I think the starting point for me would then be to then say, the one thing that we ignore in the whole entire infrastructure value chain is that, as you rightfully say, we can really have a bridge then built, we can have a house built, we can have all of these things built. One thing for sure that you'll see is that there is that, innate ignorance of dealing with the issue of maintenance. And that goes back to the issues of capacity. And that's why we're really very keen to then say, we need to develop human capacity, because there's a whole lot of new infrastructure that we've built. And I can tell you from CSI, we have also supported over 140 ECDs in the main. We've also built quite a number of infrastructure that we really put through in the system. But you go there after 3 months or after you've completed, it's just a sheer neglect that you see that there's no maintenance. And therefore, the consequences, you then get service delivery failure. And once the service delivery failure, people are not getting the services. So that's why you'll find a tap that you open, there's no water, because we don't have people that have to deal with process controllers at the treatment plant. And now you see that because of the lack of process controllers at the treatment plant, then the effluent gets into the river, then people get cholera, then we start to intervene in that particular respect. And that's why we are saying the core is to deal with also the issue of human capacity, and not that all of us in our mandates deals with the same thing of infrastructure. That's why we are saying, as DBSA, we have competence in financing infrastructure and also building infrastructure. That's why there is a role for others that specialize in their own areas to then come to the party. That's why the power of collaboration really becomes a very important element for us. And not just collaborate, but connecting also in terms of our mandates and collectively then beginning to then ensure the functionality of this thing to service our nation. But I think the issue of capacity, human capacity and human development becomes an important element. And that's why we want to start from the ECD level, because the culture, you start it from there. If then you don't deal with it at that level, that's why somebody will see a tap, dripping water, it just leaves it. And or will see a child that doesn't close it. You see a child that just throws paper on the ground. It's because we have not basically developed them that way to then deal with the issue. That's why I'm saying we go beyond just infrastructure, but also then beginning to look at our attitudes towards how we really treat the infrastructure. Sure. And I think it's important to then deal with that particular part. But the issue that you're raising in the perception, we always say the problem is enormous. And I don't want us to focus on the enormity of the problem. Sure. But we must focus on terms of what do we do with what we have now and begin to register the right progress. I always talk about the power of progress. The power of progress is going to ensure that any investor knows that this person, even if he has got 10 rands, is able to utilize it appropriately. And that's why the other issue is the issue of governance. And I'm definitely sure that most of you, from the CSI perspective, we're also conscious. We don't just want to get into somebody else that we know the governance is in tatters. That we know that we throw our money into that particular space, then the money is gone. And the person is not really aligned to your strategic objectives. So therefore, I think one of the things, this perception is correct to then say, some people view like, it's not government's, only role. That's why we're talking private sector participation to come into the system, to then be in a position to build. We just have to create a conducive environment. And that's why we're pushing that government get towards in creating a conducive environment for anybody to participate. Because you can't say private sector come and participate and then we still have a problem. I always relate this matter to then say, you find a private sector company coming and say, I want to do this wastewater treatment plant. We want an EIA. But now, just from a public partnership, things are not working. A municipality cannot give, I've got a school that we need to open it, elegant school. We need a municipality to sign off for occupation. We can't occupy because they are not issuing out the thing because they've got their own issues. So if government by itself doesn't work together, we can sing the song of saying, come private sector, but how is private sector going to get the EIA or water use license in that regard? So I think as a private sector, we've got a greater role. We just have to then anchor on institutions like DBSA, looking at the governance, all of this, to try and say, you have an established governance, let's deal and rally beyond this and utilize the little money we have to leverage more money to drive development.
And I think what's really helpful in listening to you speak is that you're not just lamenting the issue of an environment that's not conducive, the poor governance, the poor regulation. You're saying there is a pathway where we rally behind the DBSA, where that capability does exist. Because I think it is true that hesitation will always be there in the absence of a conducive environment if people start feeling that they're putting money into a bottomless pit and not seeing the infrastructure at the end of it. So it's both a challenge and a solution in one, which I appreciate in the conversation. But Ipleleng, I think you get to just make this a little bit more practical for us, because you, as the Early Care Foundation, actually partnered with the DBSA. You've gone into building into the ECD space. Tell us a little bit about that work, more as a first response, but also I'm keen to hear, based on the poll that we did, how do you see the benefit, not only for the children, but for the broader community on the back of these infrastructure assets?
Thanks, Nozipo, and good morning, everyone. The Early Care Foundation has partnered with the DBSA to do minor renovations in terms of infrastructure to also meet the Department of Basic Education compliance requirements. We know that a lot of ECD centers are unable to access funding, they are unable to comply with different departments. And one of the most expensive stumbling blocks has been infrastructure for a long time. And I think as the sector, we have treated infrastructure as a compliance tick box instead of foundational condition for quality early learning. So if children are in unsafe spaces, unhealthy spaces, they are unable to thrive, they are unable to learn, and the teachers as well in those ECD centers are unable to, comply and deliver quality programs, because they are dealing with issues of overcrowding, lack of water, and also nutrition plays quite a big role, and also toilet facilities. So when we came into this space, we were looking at cost-effective measures. How can we use resources and stretch the budget in terms of reaching more ECD centers with a limited budget? So instead of building a new center from scratch, how can we then look at minor renovations that will enable compliance, which will then lead to access to the conditional grants that the DBE has in place? So this work has really challenged us to look at what other different modalities can we look at. So we had to look at the selection criteria, risk factors, and the commitment of ECD centers that we would have selected. And in terms of the question that's on the poll, I think ECD centers do play an important role in enabling economic activity. We know we have a lot of unemployment in the country, and so community members are employed in those centers. There's economic activity. Children are able to access early learning programs, and they are community assets, but they do need to be looked after, and they do need to be compliant. So infrastructure does play an important role in that.
Thank you very much. And again, as you list, there's something that keeps coming back in this conversation. It actually started yesterday. Yesterday we called it culture. Chuene this morning says it's an attitude that we need to be looking at. And I'm hearing you here again coming back and saying it's actually how we treat our assets. And I think it actually speaks to some of the, I'll call it like the sinew that holds the bones and the flesh together in the things that we're building. And it's quite interesting that it's coming out over the 2 days so strongly. Tracey, let me bring this question to you. Investing in ECD infrastructure is one of many, 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 many needs that I'm sure land in the form of different proposals and requests to philanthropists generally. My question to you is, where does it sit in your list of priorities? And where do you think philanthropists can play a bigger and more effective role in supporting the infrastructure drive, especially at an ECD level?
Thank you, Naziba. I think we just need to, first of all, acknowledge that we're living in unprecedented times for ECD, and I've never been more excited about the sector right now. And I say that because, you know, our president positioned this front and center in the SONA, which was backed up by Treasury allocating an additional 10 billion to ECD. And that 10 billion that's sitting there is for the child per day subsidy that many of the people sitting in this room have been funding NGOs, activist organizations to increase that allocation per child per day. And so there's a window of opportunity for us now to unlock that funding. And the only way we're going to do that is if we focus and prioritize infrastructure development. So all of those early learning programs, all of those ECD centers have an opportunity now for us, together with the DBSA, to come alongside, make sure the soft infrastructure, which OMT is playing a huge role in delivering the health and safety packs. DBSA has put their hand up to say they're going to look at the hard infrastructure of securing those sites and making sure that they comply with government's regulation. Government, by the way, has done a lot in re-looking at that regulation and simplifying it.
Sure.
So everything is aligned for us to unlock that 10 billion. And once those early learning programs comply with silver and they unlock that child subsidy per day, suddenly that early learning program becomes more sustainable. You can now focus on nutritious food for that child. The working environment and conditions are a lot better, and they really can focus on delivering quality education for those children. So prior to us getting involved, the one thing our board said is, we don't fund infrastructure, okay? But the other thing they say to us is we're interested in catalytic funding and leveraging our funding to unlock systemic change. That came in the form of this infrastructure, which is how I've convinced my board to say if we put funding into this infrastructure fund, we're able to be catalytic and unlock that 10 billion that Treasury has allocated. My fear is that if we don't all work collaboratively, so I was disappointed to see that percentage out there, if we don't work collaboratively as the private sector and really get behind this infrastructure fund, we're not going to unlock that 10 billion. Everything we've promised, everything we've been working towards in funding NGOs is not going to happen because they're not going to be more sustainable. And I'm concerned that if we don't unlock that funding, Treasury is going to say, you know what, let's allocate it to health, they're ready to go.
Sure.
And the egg is going to be on our face, the private sector's face. Government's moved ahead, the systems are in place, the research has been done, the monitoring and evaluation is there. You know, the DFIs come and put their hand up, and we are not organized as the private sector, which is actually quite heartbreaking because we should be the innovators, we should be looking at leverage, we understand smart partnerships. So the time is now to really catalyze this opportunity and get the job over the line.
In 30 seconds, where do you think that hesitation comes from?
I think we haven't seen government move so quickly and so fast. And for many, I think we're stuck in an old narrative. I think we're stuck in the old narrative that we're always ahead of the game. We doing this, we doing that. And suddenly the shift happened. DBE picked up this ball and they've got out of the starting blocks. They've built a blueprint for delivery. They've asked every single stakeholder to play together to realize this vision. And I think we know who we are as South Africans. We're competitive. We want to get the job over the line. We're innovative. And honestly, the rest of the continent is looking at us to come up with a model for delivery. And I think we are so well positioned to realize the strategy and come up with a very interesting model that the LIMICs can lean on and roll out in their own countries. So we've got to go for it.
Yep. Thank you very much. And I think, again, when things are shifting, there's always the first movers and then there's the wave of having to catch up. And what I'm hearing you say is that we need to catch up. Yeah. Things are being done differently. There is first mover. There is trust that's being rebuilt in the system as well, because I think that's probably part of the hesitation. Senzo, let me bring you into this conversation. I'd love for you just to, in very briefly, tell us a little bit about Ilifa Labantwana and what you do. From what I understand is that you work at a systems level, but you also look at the conditions for effective service delivery. I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit, but also tell us a little bit about your take on the state of infrastructure at an ECD level in the country. Whether you think this is just a symptom of just a deeper structural failure as a country, or is there something else that we're missing that would help us really maybe do the work that Tracey is inviting us to, which is to really align, collaborate, and get the job done?
So thanks. I guess I'm getting a difficult question. So maybe just to start is Ilifa Labantwana, for those who don't know the organization, is you can translate the name to means children's legacy.
Yes.
That is our mission, to build the legacy for our children. The work that we do, what it seeks to do is to make sure all the efforts that we are all working towards right now will be durable and sustainable for future generations to come, for future generations of children to be born to benefit from. So that's the work that we do. And I'm going to hold it there. So if I get into the ECD space and give you a sense on how it connects to the infrastructure piece, is to the point that Tracey was making, that we've never seen government work so fast and so proactive, and actually finding ourselves catching up with government. It's been a fascinating space to find ourselves in. To give you a sense, in about 2024, the sector worked together to develop a 2030 strategy, outlining what it will take to achieve universal access to affordable and quality ECD for all children. Obviously, for Ilifa, our main focus is on children that come from the 40% poorest households. That's our focus. So those are children who come from quintile 1 and quintile 2, if I use the education language. Those children are found in rural areas, they are found in informal settlements, and they are found in townships. So that's where the focus is. So when you talk about infrastructure, one of the most unfortunate things, which the strategy also recognizes, is that the barriers to access government supports are so high for Gogo Sibia, who has an ECD center of 10 kids in a Rondaville, in Mkanduli, in Eastern Cape, to be able to be connected to the system. And when government comes and say, for Gogo Sibia, who's in an area where there is no potable water, and there is no ablution facilities connected to a running sewage system, but we expect this ECD site in an island to have those features, is really a tall ask to ask. But what it also means for those 10 children in that site, they get denied access to quality ECD service. The strategy recognizes that, but it's not just strategy that will bring about fundamental change. It's the next thing. Since then, civil society, funders in the form of OMT and government have come together to pull together what is a social compact, which is called Banapele, means children first. And in the Banapele, it is enabled by a public digital platform, which Ilifa worked with DBE to develop, called ECAS. For the first time in South Africa, government and civil society and funders, we have a sense of where are the early learning programs in the country, the state of which they are at that level, and the kind of support they need to move from where they are to get to a point where they can access subsidy. And as we talk today, we're talking about, at least in the system, there are 15,000 sites that are called bronze approved. Now, this is echo chamber language. Simply put, it's basic registration. This registration does not unlock subsidy yet. The next phase is silver registration. That's what unlocks subsidy, which is 24 Rand a child per day. So to move from being basic registered to silver, one of the biggest stumbling block is infrastructure.
Sure.
And infrastructure is, we're not talking about fancy Sentin level type buildings. Part of it is literally upgrading existing infrastructure. For others, it's adding something that is missing, something as basic as a fence, to make sure that children, they are in a safe, healthy, and conducive environment for them to learn. So that's the kind of work I think, DBSA, OMT, and Early Foundation and Ilifa, and working with government, are trying to figure out to create an opportunity for which we can roll out an infrastructure support for all Gogosbias, Mam Hlophe, to be able to access the subsidy, because that's the goal all of us should seek. And that will then unlock the 10 billion rand that Tracey was talking about. And maybe just to end on this point, to bring it home, this year alone, if each one of us in this room, and I'm assuming in this room, and I'm excluding myself here, assuming we're coming from corporates, because I'm assuming a lot of us here are from CSI, there is a Mandela Day coming. This year alone, if we can get 5,000 of that 15,000 I spoke about to get the basic infrastructure support they need, they can get to the subsidy by April next year.
Sure.
So instead of a business running a parallel process, engage with DBSA, engage with OMT, engage with LK, engage with Ilifa, engage with DBE on, can you help us identify sites that are already primed to transition from bronze to silver? And instead of painting, maybe we'll just build a fence and maybe do a little bit of painting, but make sure the kind of infrastructure upgrade you're contributing to is moving a needle to help those sites get closer to subsidy.
And I think the point you make is so wonderful, because it's also another part of data. Because I think when we think about data, sometimes we think big data sets and complex data, but just do we know what's the next best thing we can do on Mandela Day?
Exactly.
And just the difference of knowing that actually, while painting a mural is going to have great pictures, the thing that's actually going to make a fundamental difference is actually going to be the fence. And having access to that data is so important. But again, what I'm loving from this conversation is just the cohesiveness of, I feel like this panel is an example of partnership in play and what's possible when all the partners come together. I did want to tease you, Senzo, because one of the things that I noticed that we do when we want to land a point about something rural, we don't just say a rural area, we say one with a click. And I don't know if you heard his Mkandulo, you know? And I catch myself doing that all the time, and I'll talk about Onre just to land the point. But I'm going to borrow Mkandule from now on. I've got lots of questions that have come from you, and I think it's indicative of how important this conversation is. So I'm going to try my best. Maybe let me go back to Chuene, and then I'll follow the same point. Mashadi is saying, instead of focusing only on infrastructure delivery, how can we shift towards a model that builds community ownership and sustainable partnerships from the onset, ensuring that ECD facilities are not just built, but they're actively maintained? Because you raised the point around maintenance training. They're actively monitored and supported by communities and local municipalities. I think, paraphrased, is there one significant shift that we can make in order to realize all of these things that Mashadi is raising?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a very important question. That's why I'm saying we always want to go beyond just infrastructure as a hard infrastructure. And I think that's why our model is predicated on strong social facilitation and getting the community to really be involved. And I think one of the key things that we normally leave is building the governance structures within those communities. Obviously, as it has been indicated, in many cases we get involved in those rural areas, and you'll find that there's a chief, there is those structures that are there. Our aim always the time is we even have budget to support them, to really be in a position to be structured in the approach, including the training of them, including the issue around what we call a basic facilities maintenance, just to ensure that we also look in terms of the local businesses to say we have got the cooperatives here and there. Can we really then be in a position to support them over a particular period for them to begin to continue to maintain this particular infrastructure? Because for us, it's about sustainability. Because otherwise, development impact that we're going to see is going to right down the line if we don't necessarily deal with those particular kind of issues. That's why we really say we are not much so heavy on the infrastructure. It's easy for us to then build a box.
Yeah.
But the key thing is, how do we then sustain this building for maintenance? And that's why we really get to identify the community leaders and those that are competent in that particular area, train them and get them to really be aligned in those particular kind of spaces.
Tracey wants to add a layer to your comment, Chuene?
Yeah, I think this is really important. And just to build on from that, there is the conditional infrastructure grant, which is made available by government at a provincial level. And communities really should hold government account to be able to utilize that funding for maintenance going forward, and to be able to use service providers in local communities to ensure that that maintenance is done. So just knowing that that budget allocation is there, is it actually being drawn down and utilized for its intended purposes?
Yeah.
And communities should keep government accountable to that.
And I think this, Warren, I see your questions, and I'm going to probably just lift one of your comments now, and then I'll bring a question to you, Ipleleng, because Warren is saying, I absolutely agree with Tracey that 10 billion contribution makes infrastructure focus now opportune. And what I'm hearing you say is that there are pockets of ring-fence funds that are available that need to be drawn down. We just need to move. Because Siyabonga was saying, Tracey, what do you mean private sector needs to be organized and prepared already? What does that even look like? What does it look like for you at OMT? What is it that we should actually be doing? And I love questions like this because what they do is that they force us to focus on the practical, granular detail, and we move away from sort of the big theoretical statements. So if you were to respond to Siyabonga, Tracey, you say, what does the readiness mean? So
what it looked like for us was putting up our hand and saying we will actually, in the interim, set up a soft infrastructure fund. We're just managing funds. We targeted several corporates and philanthropists and asked them to put funding into that fund. We were able to raise 45 million. We seconded one of our team members, Nomsa, to the Banapele rollout. And we've been rolling out health and safety packs to early learning programs that are on the ECAS system. So we've been able to manage an RFP. We've got all the service providers. We manage that rollout across provinces, provide the feedback into the platform to make sure that we're not duplicating any efforts. And for us, we're saying we need to get a match from corporates. We've put in, between a couple of us, 45 million. But if corporates came to us and matched that, we'd be able to roll out to many, many more early learning programs. That's going to help them get towards building towards silver, which is going to unlock that 10 billion. And I mean, the same for DBSA. They're putting their hand up to manage the hard infrastructure fund. So if we pull our funding, and somebody said earlier on the previous panel, money is becoming tight. So doesn't it make more sense? None of us in this room, if we pulled our funding, is going to get to 10 billion. But if we pulled our funding into the DBSA fund or into our soft, the rollout of the health and safety packs, or getting the Nelson Mandela Day guys to deliver health and safety packs to where they needed it most, then together we're going to be able to leverage and unlock that 10 billion. So that's what I mean. Let's not try and spend a lot of money duplicating efforts or trying to, work and get infrastructure done in drips and drabs.
Sure.
Let's be a lot more efficient and streamlined in terms of the way it's managed.
Sure, fabulous. I hope, Siyabonga, that gives you the clarity and that you require, and I appreciate the clarity with which the response was offered. Ipleleng, I would like to bring Cebelihle's question to you, because I think from your lived experience, you might be able to assist. Cebelihle is saying, how can organizations, especially those offering infrastructure development in ECD, be better positioned or recognized as implementation partners within government systems and the ecosystem broadly, so that the work is considered as part of compliance processes?
Thanks for the question. I think in order for us to be inclusive in our approach, infrastructure, or let me say ECD, is quite complex, especially when it comes to compliance requirements. And I think because of where most of our ECDs are sitting, Senzo alluded to this earlier, that where the need is mostly in rural areas, in townships, and the environment there is very different from your peri-urban areas, right? So the need there is, you're looking at informal settlements, you're looking at unproclaimed land, but there are children in those ECD centers. So how do we then look at different modalities to reach children in those ECD centers that are in areas where there aren't many low-hanging fruits in terms of easily funding them for infrastructure? So I think as a sector, we need to be inclusive. We need to also look at how can we broaden the scale of funding and different approaches to reach those that may not be able to,
Sure.
to comply. In the approach that we took, this was a pilot that was done with DBSA, and out of, we had a lot of ECD centers that we assessed in order to meet our selection criteria. And we were able to only help 20 at the time because of the pilot. But we are sitting with a lot of ECD centers that do need the assistance. So I think it's about having more conversations about different funding modalities
Sure.
we can use, and also collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration to unlock that funding.
Cebelihle, I hope that's landed, but I think Ipleleng is also available post this, maybe over during the tea break, if you'd like to touch base, because I think I'm hearing your question, which is, we're ready to go as
Yes.
implementing partners, but where's the door? And how do we make sure that we're well positioned to tap into those opportunities to draw on the funds and actually get the work done? Senzo, let me bring this question from Warren to you. And Warren is saying, ECD is not a building. And I think, Chuene, you were making that point as well. And he says early childhood begins from conception to age 5, and children are found in homes, in clinics, and communities, informal spaces long before they even enter an ECD center, and many actually never do. Infrastructure matters, but in my opinion, it is not the silver bullet. And here's the question. Are we designing ECD systems around where children actually are, or what is easiest for us to fund and measure?
So I keep getting difficult questions. Cool. No, I think Warren is right. In fact, it's not just conception. ECD starts with the parents, the caregivers. And one of the amazing insights, I guess, just dawned to me is that parents today, most of them were born post-1994. Most of the parents today, by child, if you're looking at population stats. And what that means is the young people who are unemployed, we talk about, the young people who are in basic education system, who are in TVET, are also parents. So yes, you are supporting them to transition from school to world of work. You are supporting them to move from unemployment to opportunities of work. They are also parents. So them being ready, being equipped, being supported to be able to navigate the complexities of pregnancy all the way till the child is born is part of that support that I think the value chain looks like. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, one of the reasons we're focusing so much on places of care is because places of care are the enablers of women to be able to seek livelihood opportunities. So now at home, so my home is in Popoi, and I hope that's not a click, no, in Port Shepstone, is I have a sister, her name is Mabui. Mabui is currently unemployed. She has a 4-year-old at home she is looking after. She gets a 350 grant. Her daughter, my niece, gets, I think, the child support grant.
Sure.
She, at this point in stage in her life, she has to choose, we support her obviously, between placing that child in an early learning program or keeping it at home. One of the reasons we've taken the child out of an ELP is because the quality of the site is not safe for children. So what we've done there is say, Mabui, you can't go look for a job because you have to look after your child. But we've also said to the woman who's micro-enterprising in the community, trying to make a living while providing quality care, we've denied that woman a livelihood opportunity too. So if we invest in infrastructure, we're not just investing in building in this instance, we're actually investing in women. Early childhood development is a women's economic participation enabler in two folds. And that's what we're talking about. And that starts from conception all the way up until the basic education system. Because I will be provocative and say the basic education system is also a childcare space, because for those 8 hours the child is in a school, at least a parent is relieved knowing that there is some adult supervision. They can go look for livelihood elsewhere. But for the first 6 years, there isn't such a thing in South Africa. And that's why we need spaces for where children can be placed. Those spaces must be safe, they must be durable, they must meet health and safety standards that Tracey was speaking about for them to be able to get that. And I think that's the mindset shift we need to make.
Sure, it definitely deserves. And unfortunately, we don't have an NPO listing prize for panelists. You just make powerful comments and we take it. So I'd like to pull the poll back up because I'd like to use that poll to go back to that question, which I thought was also very interestingly phrased around what is most underappreciated. And as I've listened into this conversation, I'd love to hear where our panelists are and how they make sense of these results. So a quick recap is that 40% of the room almost says that it actually is around the opportunity to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty. As you bring your sister's story in, Senzo, that for me just becomes so much clearer that her ability to go and earn an income is so much more powerful than sitting at home and waiting on a grant, and potentially could break or translate into an income for her. There's 34% in the room of those who've participated, 144 people have participated, saying actually what we're most underappreciating is how other services like nutrition, like health and social support actually get leveraged. And the lowest number actually is at 6%, which is meaningful employment in communities. So having had the conversation now, and as a closing shot, I'd love to give you an opportunity to comment on how might we shift the most underappreciated to appreciated? What might we need to do to shift what you think is most important on that list so that it really is appreciated and valued accordingly? Ipleleng, I'm going to start with you and then I'm going to work my way down. Your views on this?
I think looking at the poll, I totally agree with the 39% that, by placing children in ECD centers, we're breaking the cycle of poverty because we're placing into ECD centers children who will benefit from quality early learning programs, and they are, being set for life in terms of foundational learning as they progress. But I'm also looking at the 6% where it says it creates stable, meaningful employment in communities. And I think this has been a battle in the sector for the longest time. ECD centers are set up. Grants are made available by the Department of Basic Education, as well as some funders that come through to support those ECD centers. However, there is, something about creating an environment that will enable the workforce of ECD, of the ECD sector to stay in the sector.
Sure.
So we are battling with retention in the sector.
Talent.
We are constantly capacity building, training practitioners, and we see that a lot of them are leaving the sector because the conditions of employment are lacking. And I think I want to challenge the sector. It's been a conversation that has been talked about over the last couple of years, and we're not there yet. We need, multi-stakeholder engagements to happen for us to create those employment opportunities for them to be stable. So that's something that in as much as we're creating health and safety infrastructure facilities, and all of these things that contribute to the foundational learning of children, the employment issue is still a challenge in the sector.
And thank you for bringing that angle in, because we hadn't really spoken about well, we started with the capacity, the human capacity, but I think you've closed it off. Tracey, as I work my way down, just short and sharp, your reading of this and what your call to action would be on the back of it.
So I agree with the 39%, and I would just add there that you're not only supporting the child's life, the Heckman curve tells us that if you intervene and fund between 0 and 7, you're actually changing the trajectory of your GDP down the line.
Sure.
So it actually has huge economic benefit and health benefits to society as well. On that 6%, I think if we can sort out this infrastructure and we can unlock those grants, yes, the subsidy has increased. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was, and it will make for a more sustainable environment. But the one thing I think we need to look beyond is the sort of entire value chain of ECD and how we can mobilize young people into the value chain. So if you think about food provisioning, what can we be doing to unlock economic activities for young people in that particular sector? We're working with young people in the Eastern Cape to manufacture toys.
Sure.
And we know that there's already a huge demand for educational toys at that level. The likes of Smart Start, etc., are constantly saying, how can we have homemade toys where we actually own the market over here? So I think we need to really unlock that value chain of employment opportunities in the ECD surrounding and adjacent opportunities.
Thank you so very much. Senzo?
Cool. Briefly, I'll comment probably on the 10%. And that is, for me, it builds to the point that Warren made before asking the question. And that is, for me, for as long as we're going to build beautiful buildings in communities, that is not shared community ownership. Part of it is we need to invest in shifting the mindset of our own people, of ourselves, in and around what does it mean to create a village that actually will raise a child. So having spaces of play, having places of care is part of that infrastructure. And to me, one of those, for example, is in communities in many ways. I've never heard of a church being burnt down when there are protests.
That's right.
As much as schools do get burnt down and
That's
clinics. So part of that, and that's the psyche we need to engage at in really shifting the mindsets of our own people, in valuing the spaces we are trying to invest in and building. And I think the resource and training organizations in this country that work in the ECD space have in a way cracked that nuts across the country, because they work with communities when they build and identify those spaces. And that's what we need to do to shift that 10%.
Sure. I've never heard of a church being burnt down in any community. Thank you so much. Chuene?
No, thank you so much. I think looking at the interconnectivities of these issues. I think surely agree with the poll, and from where we are sitting, obviously, that's how we don't look at things, as I said, from just we're looking at poverty, we're looking at inequalities, we look at unemployment as the core of those issues that are sitting there. And I think all of these issues that are really mentioned here, really very, very relevant. But I think the point I want to drive home is it's also about ourselves, the people that are really the players in the whole entire space. Because sometimes you focus much more on the problem you see outside and you forget about yourself as organizations. Please continue building your capacity and strengthening your capacity, because one of the key things is the execution, is the implementation of what you do. We need to then be different from the theoretical perspective of, just people talking from a policy perspective and so on, as you rightfully said, theory. But we should be seen as those people that when they get into the arena, things happen. And it's when things happen that then people are really getting to get interested to really be in a position to invest even more in yourself. And that's why I'm saying we need to really be in a position to organize our strength and rally behind each other. That's why we as DBSA, we have the strength in financing infrastructure and even in building infrastructure. Here we are, plug on yourself. You may not necessarily be in that space, but somebody is very good around the health issues and so on and so on. And that's basically the basis of saying, let's then begin to connect and collaborate and cooperate in that particular regard. And for me, one of the key issues is that we are now living in a climate change environment. There's a lot of disasters. I can tell you all the time we're receiving, schools has been wiped off, ECDs has been wiped off, and the response becomes so timid that you can see that, somebody's coming from the other side. We are not even connecting ourselves and collaborating to really begin to leverage in making sure that particular kind of thing. So I'm also saying that we need to then have to look at all of these disasters. How are we then becoming different in the response? Gift of the givers always, coming in, and now where are other players? And somebody raised the issue of us also even to identify those that may just be having the capacity to implement, but they may not necessarily have the resources. As DBSA, we have done that in Umtata. We said, let's identify those people that are really able to then be in a position to service this thing. We said look at the governance, they are fine. Let's take these 10 organizations, you service these guys to really be in a position to maintain this infrastructure that we have given in that regard. So, and again, lastly, all of these things are telling us that we must continue to stress the rent. We must continue to utilize what we have to attract more. In terms of leverage. And Tracey has spoken about the issue of the 10 billion. So we can not only get that 10 billion if we really also then take our 2 billion, let's plug it together. The power of the collective then becomes an important element in driving ourselves to the point that we say, yes, government, we see what you do, but we are also supporting you in this particular regard. We are not lamenting. So I think for me, that would be the concluding remarks.
I think it's a beautiful place to close the conversation. Let's give our panelists a big round of applause. Thank you so very much.